Welcome to the program. I'm Mark Imperial. This segment's being brought to you by booksgrowbusiness.com. It's the place where busy professionals get their books done to educate consumers, grow their practices, and leave a legacy. We're doing a series of spotlights on remarkable advisors across the country. And joining me on this segment is Clint Gharib. He's the co-founder of Oxford Retirement Advisors. Clint, welcome to the program.
Hey, Mark. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Good day to you.
Clint, so tell us a little bit about your work with Oxford Retirement Advisors and who specifically are the types of folks that you specialize in helping?
So we're an independent financial firm, if you will. My partners and I took our practice on our own, leaving a larger firm quite a few years ago. And during the course of my career, almost 32 years now that I've been in the financial services business, I've done everything from building multiple departments inside financial firms and advising other reps, as well as individual clients, families, estates, trusts, foundations, you name it. And what we realize is, as we've gotten along in our career now, I really just wanted to focus specifically on my clients only rather than building another, large firm. So we kind of got smaller to get better, if you will. So now our service specifically is only to our investment clients, which predominantly are, I hate to use the term high net worth, but it's families and endowments and foundations, individuals. And then we still work with a lot of entrepreneurs for small business plans, 401k plans as well. I know it's a wider answer than maybe you wanted, but we don't just serve one niche, if you will.
Gotcha. Yeah, we've been really wanting to do this series because of the pandemic and the spotlight it's shined on a lot of different areas in people's lives. What's changed for your clients and folks now as far as financial planning goes as a result of the pandemic? What's changed?
It's interesting when you look at a question like this is I don't know that anything's changed in how we're planning so much so that more people are making sure they have plans. A crisis like this, whenever you have a severe downturn, whether it's a pandemic, which is new for most of us to ever experienced, right, versus stock market crashes or business cycles that we've been through. But in any trying time, it seems to expose either those who didn't have any plans or plans that were very had a lot of holes in them. Let's just say that weren't very detailed. So I don't know that financial planning has changed, and I have not seen changes in how you plan, but I have seen a lot of changes in that people are going, hey, we haven't done a plan in a while, let's review it. Where before I had to initiate that, or people coming to us going, hey, I've been with advisors before and they never helped us put a plan. We got referred to you because you've done a plan for our friends or whatever. That's been the main change we've seen. People realizing they don't have them or they have insufficient plans.
I'd imagine a lot of folks just assume that the pandemic has to create some weird, dangers or opportunities as a result of, this novel situation that we find ourselves in. And speaking of like misinformation or myths or misconceptions, what kind of myths or misconceptions have you heard out there that might be sabotaging people or keeping them from getting their financial houses in order?
Well, you hear, the biggest one I deal with throughout the time is no matter where you're at in the cycle of the market is everyone's always worried about the next crash, right? And in so doing, it scares a lot of people away from taking any action, right? They get paralysis by analysis. That is a myth that I have seen throughout my career, and all the pandemic and COVID-19 did was really exacerbate that. I've known people who've been sitting in cash for years now that have been waiting for the next crash, and they've missed out on maybe one of the greatest bull markets we've seen in the last 3 years. Now, I'm not saying you blindly rush into investments, especially stock investments, but what you see on the other hand, though, is there's those who won't invest at all, right? The myth that the next crash is coming, that the pandemic was the end of times. I've heard many doom and gloom scenarios. Another myth that's very common right now here is that we're approaching financial Armageddon and the dollar is going to crash, right? So you need to get anything that's dollar related out. I've been hearing that throughout my entire career off and on different times, and like a broken clock, as they say, it's right twice a day, right? So if you keep saying the same thing long enough, eventually it might come around. But in your frozen state of fear, if you will, out of that, you end up missing, and that causes more damage than if you'd have just inched your way in slowly, because then if it does drop, great, you get to accumulate more. And that's the biggest myth that I see has been perpetuated, and all COVID-19 did was exacerbate it. The other, I would say, is you're now seeing the other side. So that's the side that doesn't want to take any action, right? And then you see the other side that came out of COVID-19 that was, oh my gosh, people wanted to play only what you hear the term meme stocks or the Reddit stocks became a very catchphrase, but the idea that people can get rich quick. And this year has been one that, I mean, you can point at a plethora of stocks that have had these gigantic runs that are not normal, right? It's not normal to make 100% return in 6 weeks. But we've seen that a lot in this past year, more so than most any other time I can think of in recent history. And that fuels the other myth, is that people think the market can never go down, right? So you've got those who are afraid, that think it's just doomed and gloom, it's bound to crash. Then we've got the other side of the coin, that we've got a lot of investors who've never invested before until COVID-19. And not just younger investors, we've got older investors who are always afraid, and after the crash, they saw that as their chance to get in. They've never seen a down market, and in their minds, this is normal. They think it's normal to make that. And all of a sudden they make an 8% return on something in a short amount of time, and they're, oh, this is horrible investment. It only made it. And I always go back to the adage, my grandfather taught me this many years ago when I was a young kid, but the idea is 8 is great, 9 is divine. If you can make a 9% return annually, that's historically the best of the market, right? 9 to 10% is what you want. So we forget, when you have a really good year, a really good couple of years, it's kind of like batting average, right? The other day, my son came home from school all excited. He was 5 for 5 on hitting. And when I explained to him a 400 batting average, what that meant, he thought that was preposterous. How could someone only bat 4 out of 10? I just hit all 5. Well, then 2 days later, he came home and he got 1 hit out of 5, right? Struck out 4 times. And you start explaining to him the law of averages. It's not just that one day. Same thing in the market. It's not just 1 year or 1 quarter. And people, I think that's the other myth that we're seeing now, is people think it can't go down. Especially what you're seeing in the cryptocurrency trend. People buy one of these and they can make huge percentages, or some of these stocks they're making huge. Those are the 2 biggest myths that maybe were out there already, but have just been gigantically exacerbated.
Gosh, if you're batting 400, you are killing it. You are a killer if you're batting 400.
You're going to the All-Star game.
I'll tell you, I've already heard this a couple of times now, a meme stock. Is that called that because people make crazy memes about them? Is that literally why they're named that? Or why is it called a meme stock?
Yeah, I think that's how it started. But like so much of our industry, right? You get jargon, and then that jargon becomes the term, and that term becomes this broad category after it started out being a very selective thing. So that's how it started out, right? Is that there were these memes created on a social network. People would get together and talk about a certain stock, and they would kind of plan and talk amongst each other, and then collectively take an action on it. And that's how it started. But now it's become this term for stocks that are moved based on, if you will, a social media movement on a particular company.
That would have been AOL. It makes me think of back in the day if they were doing memes back then.
Right.
Awesome. So as you start working with these folks, do you find any common mistakes that they make in their portfolios and their financial orders, or big pitfalls that you could help people avoid? What's something common that's a big mistake people make?
Yeah, I mean, one of the most common mistakes I'll see is, since mutual funds, well, let's talk about those. They're because they're the most widely used investment vehicle in the country, primarily because of 401k plans and retirement plans, right? The biggest mistake I see is that people don't understand looking at, if you will, overlapping stocks. And let me explain. So a mutual fund, let's say it has 100 different stocks, and a manager decides what to buy, when to buy, how much to sell, when to sell, et cetera, right? So the first problem I'll see is that people will go in and they look, and the way they pick their mutual funds, a lot of times we see is, they look at track record, and they just pick, well, no one's going to pick one that had a losing record, right? Let's say in a 5-year window. Well, if they're picking on a 5-year window, they end up with a lot of the same funds that are investing in the same place. That's why they all had that successful record. So the big mistake I see is that people will end up, and when we review people's portfolios, continuously we see this, that they might have, let's say, 5 or 6 different mutual funds, but they're all invested in the same area of the market. So when you really look at it, those 5 or 6 funds, they maybe really only have 2 different funds. That's the biggest mistake we see, is that people with overlapping stocks, right? The second mistake clearly we see is people taking more risk than they should. And we see this an awful lot, right? People who've saved their money, they've done well, they've planned, for those who've planned. And then you find when you go and review it, and they, let's say, to achieve the goals they want and the lifestyle they want, they really only need to make, let's just say, a 6% return, but yet they're a very aggressive portfolio in the market. Well, they're taking considerably more risk than they need to. If something goes wrong, a plan that's ahead of schedule could all of a sudden go behind schedule. And that's the other, is that people taking way too much risk than what they need. Now, for people who haven't done any plans and we sit down with them for the first time, by far the biggest mistake we see in that group of people, if you will, is that they have been overly conservative, right? They're the opposite. They've not made any plans, and usually their money's sitting in a hodgepodge of different accounts. And in almost all cases, what we see is it's a considerable amount, way too much of their money is in either cash or very low yielding investments that offer them no real upside return. And they want to achieve certain goals. There's no way they can get there with that type of return. So if those who make plans, we see them being more risk than they need. And those who aren't making any plans, we see them usually being way too conservative with their money. And the plans they say they want, that financial allocation can't achieve.
Great insights. I appreciate that. Clint, what inspired you to even get in this field, and how'd you get started helping people? How'd you get started?
It's funny because growing up as a child, this was not anything I would have ever thought I was going to be doing. In fact, even in college, if you'd have talked to me, I never would have thought this is what I'd be doing. My whole focus was on political science and Russian when I was a child, and in college, that's what my majors were. But a friend of mine, when I was trying to get into different positions that were with my field, what I'd studied in college, worked for Shearson at the time. And I had a very small amount of money I'd got from an inheritance, and had invested. He was kind enough to help me and teach me along the way. So when the crash of 1987 happened, I was in college, and my family had a restaurant. My mother and I had a small restaurant in Indiana. Never really had the boom times of the 80s, if you will. It was suffering through an agriculture area. So in 1987, when the stock market crash happened, at that time, I had a real decision, as our family restaurant was in a real bind. And I'd written a blog once about the dangers of writing personal guarantees, which my mother and I learned the hard way being young entrepreneurs. But I really had a decision to face, right? Either the money I had saved from working for college for that next semester, I really needed to put that towards helping the family restaurant, or stay in school. I couldn't do both. So I had a real dilemma. And then when the crash of 87 happened, for a lot of people, that was a bad day. But for me, what changed my whole life is I ended up taking all the financial aid that I had for the next semester and all the money I had saved for that next semester, and I went full into the stock market after the crash. And ended up, luckily, doing well with the recovery, very short amount of time on some of the names I bought, that I was not only able to pay for next semester in college, but I was able to help the family business. So in a sense, I went from one of the saddest moments in my life thinking, do I stay in college and do I go help the business and sacrifice college, to now having both. So from then on, to me, the stock market was a way of achieving dreams. That's what it's meant to me since. But I realized I somewhat got lucky, right? That is not something I would ever advise people to do, take everything and go all in like I did. And from then on, kind of my passion became, how do you hedge risk, right? Because there are opportunities there in the market, right? And you hear media personalities say there's bull markets or bear markets, you can make money either way, right? And that's true. There's always opportunity. You've got to look for it, but it's how to hedge that risk. So that's what got me interested in it. And then, as I say, at the time, going for different government offers that I got accepted into a training program with a financial firm in the meantime, while I was waiting on security clearances. Finally, one offer had come through, but by that point, I had excelled in the security training program, and I kind of took to it like a duck takes to water, and was having so much fun enjoying it that I turned down the government offer. And usually once you turn down one, you're not going to get more of them. And so here I am, 30 some years later, as financial services. But to me, that's what it is. It's investing to me is a way to achieve dreams, and it's helped me achieve mine. So I love trying to help others achieve theirs. It's a great feeling when that happens.
Wow, what a great story. And I love the fact that you really just got your education early on and taken risks, fortunately paid off for you in that case. Right. But now you started to learn down the road on how to hedge those risks and make it safer. So I could see, the passion that you have in this field. It's terrific. Clint, before I ask you my last question, I want to know, for the listeners out there who are tuning in that are now saying, gosh, I do need to get my financial house in order, and they're considering working with an advisor, what are the most important things people should consider when hiring an advisor or deciding on one to work with? What should they look for?
That's a great question. And going back to your myths question, right? One of the myths people rely on is they ask for referrals from a potential advisor they're talking to. And while that's a valid question and I always caution people, be wary of that. That may be one of your data points, but don't let it be a primary, because no advisor, any company you would go to ask for referrals, they're not going to send you to someone unless they think they're going to get a good opinion, right? So to me, that's not a way to really find a good advisor. Referrals obviously are people like to do that, but I would say you still have to talk to them yourself. Don't just take a referral blindly, because your situation could be completely different than your friends. And even if we're the same age, the same amount of money, with the same goals, our temperaments are different, right? Our personalities are different. So you need to find someone that matches with you. But I would caution, make sure the person is a fiduciary, make sure they are registered as an investment advisor, not just simply a broker. And not that there's anything wrong with being a broker by any means, but it's a very different level of suitability or liability, A fiduciary is required by regulation to always put the client's interest first in any circumstance. And if there's a conflict of interest, they have to make that known. So I would encourage you to look for someone who has that licensing. It's not a guarantee that they will fulfill that duty, but at least it's another level of responsibility, and it should give you a little bit more comfort. I would also say clearly look at experience, how long someone's been in. It's funny, now that having been in this profession for so long, I realize why early on and when I was starting, one of the people once said to me, it was one of my first clients I ever got into business. It's a much older gentleman. I think he helped me educate me more than I was certainly helping him. And I'll never forget him for that. But one of the lines he told me, and I'll never forget, was, and he said, the profession you're in is really like, he said, it's like being a guy who puts on horseshoes on a horse. He goes, you can study all day long in college, but until you get that horse in the straps, he goes, the experience is all, books don't help. You have to be in it. And I as a kid who grew up with horses, I was always kind of like, what? But I realized, and to put that in a simpler term, I guess, in a cleaner way for people to understand it, is that experience matters. If someone's never been through a bear market, they've never been through a crisis or a crash in the market. I mean, a true crash, not just a profit taking. It's very different. It's like the old joke, Mike Tyson, everyone had a plan until they got hit the first time, right? It's that way in the market. You need to make sure someone has experience. Secondly, I would make sure you meet with them, even if it's talking telephone. With today's technology with Zoom, you can be there, right? Mm-hmm. The idea that you talk with them, spend time, and make sure you feel comfortable with them, that they understand your situation, and that what they're saying back to you makes sense. I would be wary of anyone with like cookie cutter proposals. Like going to say, hey, I have these models, answer this questionnaire to see what model you fit in. Well, that might work for some people, but a lot of people situation, at least what I find is the situation's as unique as the person, right? No one's really the same. So I know that's going on maybe a little longer than you want in that answer, but I would just say those are a few things that I would say when you're looking for an advisor. Cost certainly is one of them, but don't let it be your only one. Just like you wouldn't take a referral blindly, don't just go with cost only, right? Sometimes you're getting what you pay for, and other times you're being overcharged. So it's considerable. The last thing I would venture is to someone who maybe is working with an advisor or looking to work with an advisor. The thing that I see time and time again when we meet with people for the first time, they don't even know what they're paying their advisor. I mean, would you ever hire someone on your show that you don't know what you're paying? Of course not. No employer would. But when you hire an advisor, they become, in a sense, your employee. And so we always tell clients, think of me as your employee. I work for you, right? People get afraid, oh, I don't want to call, you're busy. I work for you. Call me when you have questions. That's what I need you to do. And in the same breath, know what you're paying someone. If you don't know what you're paying them, how do you know what value you're getting from them?
Really sage advice. Your horseshoe analogy reminded me of like cutting my dog's toenails. What a nightmare. And,
I could shoe a horse before I would go through cutting the dog nails. You know, if you get that nail just too close, I don't like that.
While he's pulling and he's pulling and he's pulling. You gotta get him in there. And the cookie cutter approach, I could totally see like that's an oversimplification, I'd imagine. So
it really is.
Clint, for folks listening right now that would love to meet with you and love to speak with you, how do they find you, connect with you, and learn more?
Well, I always laugh. Sometimes, do you have a business card? And I'm like, well, if I do or don't. Luckily, with my name, it's pretty. I mean, generally the only one you'll find on the entire internet if you search my name. But oxfordra.com. We did that instead of putting Oxford Retirement Advisors. So it's oxfordra.com is the website. You can email me as well. I'm open to that. I try and help anyone in the public if there's a question, if I can. My phone numbers are on the website. You can call the offices at 404-479-8341 is local in Atlanta. Or again, the easiest way, we always see people just go right to the website. You can see our whole team, our approach, and read our past blogs and market updates as well to get a feel for us.
Clint, you've been terrific. I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing with my audience today, and I wish you continued success for you and for all of your clients.
Thanks so much, Mark. You have a joyous day and a wonderful holiday.
That was Clint Gharib. He's a co-founder with Oxford Retirement Advisors, and this segment's been brought to you by booksgrowbusiness.com. It's the place where busy professionals get their books done, educate their consumers, grow their practices, and leave a legacy. That's all for now. I'm Mark Imperial, and thanks for joining me.